Beshalach Sicha, but the reality is it's really a Shvat Sicha, and therefore it's still very relevant to our current affairs. So just to catch everybody up, because we missed a few days, we were talking about the Kli Yakar. It was giving an explanation, seemingly all people, the pshat of the first couple verses of the parsha. We explained the juxtaposition of two verses. And basically explained on one hand, there's a first verse that says, God took the Jewish people in the midbar in a circuitous, is that the right, how you pronounce that? Circuitous path, right? And they were chamushim, they were armed on their way out of Mitzrayim. So there's two points that he makes. First of all, that they were in the midbar, and secondly, that they were armed. And the Kli Yakar wants to point out that both of those things are connected with the second verse where it says Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. Because it says basically the bones of Yosef, he explains it over there, that he took them in the midbar because there's this concept that we were going to run into the Yam Suf, and therefore we were going to need the schus of Yosef's bones to split the sea. And then Yosef's bones are connected to the second part of the verse where it says they were armed when they came out of Mitzrayim. How were they armed? They were armed, so to speak. What was their armament? It was the Aron HaKodesh, which fought their wars for them. And until we had the Aron HaKodesh, Yosef's Aron, if you remember, stood in its place because he kept all the laws that it said in the Aron HaKodesh. If you recall, we spoke about that he was sort of a replacement. So the Rebbe says those are beautiful drushas, but the Rebbe wants to sort of link it in a little bit with the pshat a little deeper because there's no real mention of any of those things so clearly. So the Rebbe sort of finds a common point where what is so unique about Yosef's bones. First of all, we said, why is he called bones in the Torah? It's seemingly not a nice way to speak about a tzaddik. And we answered that it is referring to the essence of Yosef, because atzmus also means like atzmius. And what is the essence of Yosef, we said, can be found in his name, where when he was named, it says, Yosef Hashem li ben acher. His mother Rachel named him with this peculiar name that you should add for me another son. And we said the concept there is that Yosef has this quality, and his essence is that from an other, he can make a son. That Yosef's unique power, basically, was that he had the ability to turn darkness into light, and to makar a yid who was in a state of other, which is the concept of the sitra achra and all the negativity, and nonetheless he had the power to turn him into a son. And so we said this is also connected with the end of the parsha. The beginning is wedged to the end, and the end is wedged in the beginning. What happens at the end of Parshas Beshalach? Who can remember anymore? We've moved on. But it was this war of Amalek. And we said that Moshe says kind of an unconventional thing. He's the leader, but he goes to Yoshua, and he says, Bachar lanu anashim, choose for us men. How did Yoshua get involved in us having men? Because we said Yoshua comes from none other than Yosef, right? He was from the offspring of Yosef. And since the whole Indian of Amalek was that Amalek only came to those who were nechashalim acharecha, those who the clouds spit out due to their sin, they were literally called acharecha. So the idea is that the koach, the Jewish people, to go running out of the tent, and like the chutzpah to even decide that was the right thing to do, to leave the clouds of glory and to go after people who were spit out of the tent because of their sins. They were like acher to their Father in heaven. It took the koach of Yoshua to go and have this koach to go out there and bring them back in, right? And so this is basically, we're seeing this in the end of the parsha, its connection with the beginning of the parsha, this notion of Yosef and his essence. That's a review from all we did before. So now we'll start today's class, page 103 here, the very last paragraph, chapter 5. I'm going to start in on a fuller explanation. Yes, you with me, everyone? Any questions? Got it. Now he's going to kind of go back to this Kli Yakar and explain how it all works out very well between the verses where it says that Yikach Moshe es atzmus Yosef imo, that Moshe, when he was coming out of Mitzrayim, he took the bones, which we now know is the essence of Yosef. How is that connected to the second verse where it says V'yasev Elokim es ha'am derech hamidbar? That the verse before that says that Hashem is going to take them in this circuitous route through the desert. What's the connection? Because if the Jewish people were going to go directly into Eretz Yisrael from Mitzrayim, which they didn't, Sha'az haisa agula shlema, it would have been immediately the redemption. They would have gotten to the Holy Land, the Promised Land. Lo haya kol kach hechri lekachas es atzmos Yosef imam leman atzmam. Then they wouldn't have actually had to have bring the bones of Yosef with them. In other words, he says leman atzmam, and he puts it in italics there, because they would have still had to bring the bones of Yosef with them, because they made an oath to bring those bones. But in other words, it wouldn't have had to been like highlighted that we're going in the circuitous route through the desert, and then the next verse is we bring the bones of Yosef. If it was just they were fulfilling the promise to Yosef, you could have put that in somewhere else. But the fact that they're going through the desert suddenly requires, according to the Rebbe's reading, explaining the Kli Yakar a little bit better, that therefore, because we're going to the desert, we're not going straight into Eretz Yisrael. We need the bones of Yosef. We need this power because of our journey in the desert, right? And he's saying that Mimitzrayim halchu Yisrael midbar, that from the Egypt we didn't go to Eretz Yisrael, we went to the Midbar, and the Midbar is called elsewhere in the Torah Midbar Hagadol v'Hanora Nachash Saraf Akrav v'Tzimon Asher Ein Mayim. The Midbar has some scary adjectives attached to it. It's called a big and scary and awesome mid-desert with snakes and scorpions and other kinds of snakes, and thirst where there's no water. So the Rabbi actually has an amazing sikha where he delineates why the Midbar is called all those adjectives and all how frightening it could be. But the point is, we weren't going to Eretz Yisrael. We had a task on our hands, turning the page, right? And what it means is makom shel sakana b'gashmias. It was quite literally a very dangerous place physically, umishum shel makom sakana b'ruchnias, right? And therefore, why was it physically dangerous? Because it was actually very spiritually dangerous. The desert of Midbar Ha'amim over there was like a spiritual nightmare for Jewish people to go and try and conquer this, right? It was like going to the heart of the darkness, as they used to say in the old school, right? So he says, Lo Yeshev Adam Sham. What is the desert, right? It's called a place where man does not dwell. That's the definition of a desert. Lo Yeshev Adam Sham. Because, right, and the idea is, what is the spiritual meaning of man cannot dwell there? Famously, this is brought in many places. Makom she'einenu mesug shel yishuv shel atem kroim Adam. Who's the Adam that can't dwell in the desert? The Jewish people are called Adam, right? Atem kroim, of all the four different names that are man, right? Adam, Ish, Enosh, Gever. The Yidden are dafka called Adam. It's like a name that goes uniquely on us. And when the Torah tells us that a desert is a place where Lo Yeshev Adam Sham, is telling you it's no place for a good Jewish boy, right? Man, Jew, has no business in this place. Makom Adam Ha'elyon. And why is that? Because the Adam Ha'elyon, the one who's called the man on the chariot, the supernal man, Eino Shochein Sham. He's not there, right? So what are you going to do there if Hashem doesn't dwell there, right? Sha'alav Ne'amar, this Adam Ha'elyon, it says, Al Demus HaKisei Demus K'marei Adam, Elav Milamayla. So it's like, how do we know Hashem is called Adam? Because we actually read it Haftorah recently. The chariot, that on the chariot was the form of a man that sat upon this chariot. It was a metaphor, of course, for Hashem. And when it says Lo Yeshev Adam Sham, in this desert, man cannot dwell there, it's talking about the supernal man does not dwell there. And therefore, certainly, Atem, who are called man, have no business being there if you can't bring God there. Sham yitachin shehudi lo yechol lamod b'nisyonos hakayam sham. It's very possible that a Yid who goes into that situation won't be able to stand the test. V'hu yagil matzav shel acher rachman litzlan, and therefore it's sort of laid out for him to become an acher. Right? You can't throw the guy into the heart of darkness and think that it's just going to all go smooth. And this whole reality of leaving Mitzrayim, Alavai, we went from Mitzrayim right into Eretz Yisrael. We didn't. We went into this midbar where it's almost impossible to live as a Jew. And this should explain to you a little bit further, to be, as we say, Malamid Schus on our forefathers. How could they be complaining? Every second they're fighting with each other. They're complaining. We just had in the Parsha yesterday, there was only one journey, right, that they were actually in peace. When they came from Refidim to Har Sinai, it says, Vayichan Sham, Yisrael, we dwelled there, and it says in the singular because we were like one man with one heart. And Rashi says, what over there? To the exclusion of every single one of the other journeys where we were in a state of machlokes with each other. It wasn't just stam, we were all angry. We were in a desert where godliness cannot dwell. And now it makes a lot more sense why in the pasuk that says we're going to the desert, the next pasuk says they took the bones of Yosef, they took the essence of Yosef with them. Now, Tavka, you needed to say that. In other words, what they took into the desert with this power that they were able to make from an acher into a ben. Because in such a spiritual situation and a physical danger, even, you're going to for sure need this power of being able to save those who fall into the acher desert. In other words, to be able to have the power of transformation of turning a yid back into a son to his father in heaven. So fine, moving on to Vav. We can learn now a lesson for all times and places from this pasuk that we're taking the bones of Yosef where we go. Why? Because halichasam shel Yisrael b'meshek kol zman hagalos he can move him b'pashtus v'kamavur b'sfarim halicha b'midbar ha'amim. Because the Torah is not just speaking about a history lesson. The Jewish people left Mitzrayim and they went into a desert. Unfortunately, this desert never went away. From the time we went into that desert, we've still been in the desert. And the desert is a metaphor for all of our journeys that we're going to take until we finally get to Yarden Yerecho, which is the Mashiach times, right? So all the 42 journeys of the desert, even though we actually did wind up getting into Eretz Yisrael, but we see that we also got kicked out of Eretz Yisrael. We went back in, we got kicked out. It's been one big gullus from beginning to end. So the 42 journeys are actually a story of the entire story of human history until we make it mamash to the promised land. And therefore, the idea of going to the desert is something which is still very relevant. And therefore, taking the bones of Yosef with us is like a permanent lesson that we need to have these bones, or we're not going to be able to make it to the Holy Land. Chas v'shalom. And therefore, we can learn an eternal lesson, right? That when we're in Gullus, which is unfortunately the situation, you have to conduct yourself with these bones of Yosef in your hand, which is the avoda of Yosef to be able to turn an acher and into a ben, and return him to his father in heaven. Now we're going back again to the Klei Yakar and bringing the Rebbe's Chiddush on top of the second parish that he had, which if you recall, in the verse that we're trying to connect Yosef's bones with, there was 2 points. One, we went into the desert, and what was the other point? We went out chamushim, armed, right? If you recall, got to do a little review on that. But the idea of most Yosef's bones was being juxtaposed to the previous verse, which had 2 different points in it. One, that we went out into the Midbar, where the Kli Yakar says we needed those bones in order to split the sea. And one, we went out armed because Yosef was the armament. So we just explained what it means. We needed Yosef bones to go into the Midbar because we need to have this quality of turning the Acher into a Ben. But what about the second part? This that it says Chamushim al bnei Yisrael me'eretz Yisrael. We went out armed. She'achad perushim shel Chamushim. Another explanation of armed from the word Chamushim is what? Right? Echad michamisha. It also means 1/5 yatsu. And Rahman al-Islam, 4/5 died in the plague of darkness. And therefore, if we're reading it not so much that they came out armed, but we're going to read the other shot of Rashi, they came out 1/5, then it makes sense again that we're going to bring in this Indian that they took the bones of Yosef, the essence of Yosef with them. That's why the Torah comes and says in the next verse, Yikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef imo. Mishum shelokchim es atzmos Yosef b'meshek kol hazman shel acher kach, because they're going to have the bones of Yosef, the essence of Yosef's mission, all the journeys afterwards, including all of Gullus, shemikol Yehudi shum matzav shel acher, which means that every yid who's in an acher situation, you can make into him a ben to our Father in heaven. Therefore, every single Jew will be able to be redeemed from the Gullus. In other words, what he's saying is to override the tragedy that when we came out of Mitzrayim, we did not come out full. We came out 1/5 full. Therefore, when we're told that in conjunction with the verse that says, but now we have the Atzmos Yosef with us. So this can never happen again. And that's what he goes on to explain in the next paragraph. He says, Kefisha huzbru kama pamim, as the Rebbe explained many times, the words of Chazal, right? B'tshuva l'shelos ben arasha. You're sitting around your Pesach Seder, and you might remember the words of the Ben Harasha. Does anyone remember what the wicked son says? What is it? What is this avoda to you? And what does he do? Yotzias atzom min haklal. He took himself out of it, right? And so what do we say back to him? Some nasty words, right? What do we say back? No, yeah, we break his teeth, and then what do we say? Yeah, we say if you were there, you left yourself out. If you would have been there, you would have been left out. Nasty. But look how Chassidus kind of sweetens it up. Ilu hayasham lo hanigal. We say to him, if you were there, you wouldn't have been brought out. But that's because only 1/5 came out of Mitzrayim. But that's not going to happen again. You know why? Because we brought the bones of Yosef with us. And therefore, you Rasha, your Acher, it's not going to happen again. In the ultimate Gula Shlema, not one Jew is going to be left behind because we learned our lesson. We took the Atzmus Yosef with us. So we say if you were there, you would have been left behind. Shadavki ilu haya Mitzrayim lo haya nigal. In Mitzrayim, you wouldn't have been left behind. You would have been left behind. But in the Gula Hanochis, of the Gulas Hanochis, with this present Gulis, you will be redeemed. Right? Umikra mali dibir hakasav, and it's openly spoken. V'ivtiach hakasav, we're promised bilti nidach mimenu nidach, that not anyone will be pushed out and left behind. Down to the point that it's actually a psak din. The Rebbe was very adamant about publicizing this and promoting this concept. And of course, he actually lived an entire life, one by one, gathering each and every Jew, because no Jew will be left out of the current Geula, which is good news. Good news and bad news means you can't leave it. We can't get there without everybody. So you gotta get your bones of Yosef going strong. Yeah.
Is that only like the last couple of generations before the Gula, or is that like Jews throughout all generations? Because if that is the case, then a question about Yoshkin, I guess a couple of other Jews, like are you getting sort of a sound?
Adrabah, tshuva is accepted. I mean, listen. I'm sure there's better judges, but in general, if you do tshuva umiyad hanigal, and it says they do tshuva, will be immediately redeemed. Bezrat Hashem. It says, "Odecha Hashem ki anaftabi." Don't forget, it says, in somehow we're going to get to such a realization that we're going to thank Hashem for hurting us, for damaging us. Right? We're going to actually get to such a point of realizing the darkness is light to the level that, He's going to remove the evil from the earth. So, Mistama, tshuva's on the table. The knowledge that of this Ben Rasha, that you're telling him, hey, you're going to come out with us, by the way, in this present Geula, it actually arouses in him to return to Hashem's Torah and to become a Ben Chacham, like his brother over there, and a son to his Father in heaven once again. So again, now the Rebbe has brought this new concept of the Atzmos Yosef to basically bring a clear understanding of the Kli Yakar. It's like this, basically Kli Yakar's thanking him for saving the day over there. He gave like a very interesting pshat, but it wasn't so connected with pshat. Once the Rebbe brings this idea of what Yosef really means, then all that is actually mukhrach and necessary in the pshat, and everything the Kli Yakar said is completely smooth with the verses now. So that's that. Do you have a question? You mean those who were chayav kares?
The Rebbe answers that. It says only the outside rope gets cut. The inside rope is never cut.
The inside rope is never cut. Yeah. Okay. Listen, I'm all for tshuva. Good enough. But the point is that every Jew is coming out. Okay, so let's go to chapter 7, where we're going to actually get into our. I promised you this is a Shvat experience. So we're still in Shvat, in the thick of it. Today is actually Chai Shvat, the life of Shvat. So you gotta get to the bottom of it. So he says, Parshas Beshalach Nikras Tamid B'Chodesh Shvat, always read in Shvat. And this Chodesh is connected specifically with the avoda of Yosef. Who knows why? Yosef Yitzchak. But biblically, there's an inseparable, the month of Shvat from Yosef. He'll explain to you now. Ki yudua, as it's known, Shnei Masar Chadshei Hashana Hem Keneged Shnei Masar Hashvatim. The 12 months, of course, correspond to the 12 tribes. V'lefi Seder Holadatam Shel Hashvatim, according to the birth order of the tribes, who was born in the 11th order, in the order? Yosef, right? Chodesh Shvat is the 11th month. HaChodesh HaChadasar Min Nisan, right, is Keneged Yosef. So we're in the month of Yosef. And therefore it's not just accidental that the Beshalach, which speaks about the Atzmos of Yosef, is sitting inside of Shvat. This is the month where we basically take the Atzmos Yosef with us, right? This month empowers us to be able to be strengthened to make other Jews who are Rashoim into Tzaddikim and go out of the cloud and like empower us with this whole union of Yosef. It's Dafka the month of Shvat which does that. And yes, of course, it's very connected with the idea of the Yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak, who obviously promoted this notion in ways that had never been done before of getting back every single Jew, translating Chassidus into every language and essentially starting the Chabad movement as we know it today, in terms of its worldwide shluchim and so forth. Kedei lahavin es hakesher shel chodesh Shvat el Yosef yesh lahaktim techila es mavur b'sifrei Kabbalah. It's getting Kabbalistic. In order to understand the real deep connection between Yosef and the month of Shvat, let's look in Kabbalah Sfarim. Basically the Arizal, and then the Bnei Yissaschar is not exactly a Kabbalah Sefer, it's like a Hasidic Kabbalah Sefer, but he there explains this unique, it's an amazing Sefer, by the way, the Munkacher Rebbe. He explains every month, there's a unique Shem Havaya Tziruf, right? One of the ways of combining the Hashem's 4-letter name, there's 12 ways of combining it. Each one of them refers to a particular month. We're already told that from the Sefer Yetzirah, the Arizal tells us a certain verse that you find in the Torah, which there's for every 12 ways of spelling Yud Kei Vav Kei, there's another verse in the Torah which has that Rosh Tevos of that exact configuration in it. It's awesome. So there's a whole verse which is associated with that configuration of Hashem's name, which is connected with that month. And so and then in the Sefer of Bnei Yissaschar, he like Mamash is I think the only place that we know, the first place I should say, where he like actually goes and gives deep explanation as to what's the inner meaning of that verse and its connection to the month, and it's Mamash fascinating. Here, the Rebbe is bringing from here, and he says that in the Shnei Masar Chadshei Hashana Me'irim Shnei Masar Tzirufim Shel Shem Havaya, these 12 months have 12 different combinations of God's name. B'kol Chodesh Meir Tziruf Miyuchad Shel Shem Havaya. Each one gets its own 4-letter combination. Hatziruf Shel Shem Havaya Shel Chodesh Shvat. What is the combination of the month of Shvat? Does anyone know? He actually gives advice over there that you should actually have in mind this combination of each month when you say the Musaf prayer on Rosh Chodesh every month. And a lot of people do this around the world. In other words, there's a basically a main middle bracha in the Musaf prayer that we say on Rosh Chodesh. And if you can, you're supposed to have in your mind the tziruf of that particular name of God when you're saying Baruch Atah Hashem.
Did you mention this once before, like you have it in your sitter or something?
I mean, it's not a Chabad minhag that I've ever seen, but he does say it in this Sefer. It's not a Chabad Sefer, so I mean, it's not something that you regularly hear, but it's a minhag of the Munkacher. So it's cool. Anyway, I mean, his whole Sefer is deep into this avoda. So I mean, it's contagious. But anyway, what's that? You can find these tzirufim in the Sefer Yetzirah. They're not hard to find. Yeah. K Yud and then Vav K. Right? So that's what he's saying here, that this tziruf, this combination, is, first of all, Hey and Yud and Vav and Hey in that order, but we're told what pasuk is it from, And he quotes here, Heimir Yimirenu V'hayahu. Right? So you're gonna, it's a little snapshot actually of not a whole verse, but 4 words within a verse. Which, does anyone know what those words mean? Heimir Yimirenu V'hayahu. When you get caught off guard when you see the middle of a verse, maybe you don't pick it up. But does anyone know what Tamura is? The concept of Tamura, yes?
It's that in Kaddish, if you make something holy, then you add, and then you say that instead of this cow, then make this cow Kaddish.
Right, exactly, right? It's, in other words, you have a holy cow, and then you have a non-holy cow. And you're not allowed to, as we're going to soon see. The class is basically over, so I'm going to kind of leave us in suspense on this point. But the law goes that you're not allowed to say that I'm going to transfer the holiness of this cow onto this one. You're not allowed to take the Kedusha off. But if you do, you get penalized and fined that not only did you not take the Kedusha off, but you actually put the Kedusha on both cows, and now basically they're both holy, which means you were trying to do yourself a little favor and say, I want to eat this cow, or I want to use it, so I'll put the Kedusha over here, which you can do in other things, but not in holy cows. And therefore, when you try to do that, you wind up making them both holy. And you don't want to do that. So hold on a second. But so this is the Indian of Tamura, and in this pasuk, he says, Hemir Yemirenu Bahayahu. It says, you shall make this transfer. If you make this transfer, Harehu Utmurasu Yakodesh. It and its transfer will become holy. So we'll discuss it more tomorrow. It's